Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with a video on the Game of the Year 2017. Many commentators have already published analysis of this game on YouTube, but this video is with comments of the winner himself, as published in the magazine New in Chess. The game was played on November 4th, 2017 in the Chinese League in a match between, and forgive me for my pronunciation, Hangzhou and Zhejiang. And the white player was Bai Jinshi, and he is a talented 18-year-old junior, and the black player was China's #1 Ding Liren, the first Chinese player ever to qualify for the Candidates Tournament, which will be held in March in Berlin. Let's have a look at the game and see what Ding himself had to say about it. d4 from white, and Ding played knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, the Nimzo Indian defense, knight f3, Ding castled, Bai played bishop g5, c5, e3, c takes, and here Bai took with the queen, and Ding writes, this variation is not so popular, normally people take back with the e-pawn. And he gives this variation, d5 and then queen c2, and he says this was played in Magnus Carlsen versus Ding in St. Louis this year. But Bai took with the queen. Knight c6, kicking the queen, and queen to d3. And Ding points out in New in Chess that the other plan is to go to f4 with the queen, but after bishop takes c3, b takes, h6 kicking the bishop, bishop takes, queen takes, and g takes, black has no problems at all. He has already equalized, as Ding writes. So after knight c6, the queen did not go to f4, it went to d3, h6 kicking the bishop, bishop to h4, and d5. Here Bai played rook d1, and Ding writes, it came as a surprise to me. I had been expecting a3, and he gives this variation, bishop takes, queen takes, and g5, bishop g3, and knight e4, and black is fine. But rook d1 came as a surprise for Ding. He played g5 anyway, bishop g3, and now Ding played knight e4. And Ding writes that if he had seen white's next move, he might have chosen the safer queen a5 instead. Because after knight e4, white played knight d2, which Ding calls a good move, which I hadn't expected. And now things are not so easy, he says. He then says he didn't want to play the position after bishop takes c3, b takes, knight takes g3, h takes, king g7, and he says black is very passive. So he chose another move, he chose knight c5. Attacking the queen again. The queen went to c2. Ding says he had expected queen b1 instead, and then he had planned d4, e takes d4, queen takes d4 with a complicated position. But queen c2 was played. d4 anyway, knight f3, and e5, and Ding says, fortunately I have this move, otherwise I would just lose the pawn on d4. White is now going to take on e5. He could have taken with the bishop, but then knight takes, and Ding says, during the game I was worried about this position until I found the move rook e8. And he says this is very strong, and Ding gives a lot of analysis here, and I will not go into that. But Bai did not take with the bishop, he took with the knight. And here comes the first magical move which makes this game the Game of the Year 2017. Ding plays d takes c3 here, and leaving his queen unprised on d8. Ding writes here he had already seen the 18th move, this was the 15th move, he had already seen knight a4 3 moves later, and he realized that black should be better here. And white has to take the queen. If you take on c6, then bishop f5, and Ding writes, both of us saw this during the game, which wins immediately for black. For example, white cannot move his queen out of the attack by the bishop. This attack, as then the c-pawn will give a deadly discovered check. So if this queen moves, then c3, c2 with a discovered attack, discovered check from the bishop to the king. So knight takes c6 was not playable, and Bai took the queen. C takes b2 check. Again, this bishop gives a discovered check on the king. And now Ding had expected rook d2, which he calls a better move, but with accurate play black can equalize. Again, Ding gives many variations here to prove this point, but let's continue with the moves from the game. Instead of rook d2, Bai played king e2, and Ding calls this a serious mistake. He took back on d8, queen took pawn, and this is the move he had foreseen, knight a4, and he writes that Bai had probably missed that move. He may have expected rook d2 check instead, and that wins the queen back because of the rook fork. But then queen takes d2, bishop takes, and knight takes c6, and white is slightly better here. So knight a4 was missed by white and is a very strong move. Attacking the queen, queen went to c2, and knight c3 check. King went to f3, and here's the second magical move. And even the world champion Magnus Carlsen had to say something about this move. Here it comes, rook d8 to d4. Ding calls it a key move and a very beautiful one. I had seen it when he played queen takes b2, when white took that pawn. When I double checked knight a4. I got very excited when I saw I could play this move, and after I had made it, many players started thronging around our board. Magnus Carlsen had something to say about this. I found it somewhere else, not in the magazine New in Chess. He said, it was not only the move rook d4 which gets the headlines, but the follow-up was also both accurate and beautiful. It's not going to be easy to beat that. I had already a training session with Ding, so I was already impressed with how fast he can calculate very difficult lines. And that's one of the reasons I found him the most interesting opponent in St. Louis. That was for the Champions Showdown, and I've made a video on that elsewhere on my channel. It's video number 245. Well, the most obvious line is, if you take the rook, that's not possible because of knight takes d4 check with a nice fork on king and queen, king e3, knight takes c2, check, and black is winning here. He's material up. So after rook d4, Bai did not take the rook, he played h3. And now h5. And Ding says he's threatening mate. Let's look at the mate. Let's make a silly move for white. Let's play a4 just to see the mate that Ding is talking about. g4 check, h takes, bishop takes, knight takes, and h takes g4 is a beautiful mate with a pawn. Look at this position. What a beautiful checkmate. Very nice. So that's a threat after h5. And Bai played bishop h2, making room for the king on g3. g4 check anyway, and Ding says, by now I knew that my position was winning, but also that I should be very careful. You have to be careful that the mating attack is indeed mate, otherwise you might have burned your bridges behind you. King g3, and Ding says, white wants to take the pawn on h5, hoping to survive. He wants to come here to take that pawn, and it's going to happen in the game. And rook d2, another beautiful move. Another key move Ding writes that black needs in order to win. I had seen it when I went 20 rook d4. It's amazing what these top grandmasters see in such a crazy position. The queen has to play, the queen is attacked, so queen b3. Ding writes the queen has no good place to go to. Knight e4 check. King h4. Bishop e7 check. King takes pawn as planned. And now king g7, clearing the way for the rook to come to the h-file. The rook on a8. Bishop f4. And Ding says this is the only move to prevent black's plan. He shows this variation. You cannot take on c6, then bishop f5 and knight b8. It's an inventive way to keep this rook out of the game. The knight, of course, is protected by the bishop all the way back on h2. But it fails to rook d8, another beautiful variation. And now it is this rook that will join the mating attack on h8. Wonderful. Bishop f4 is the only move that allows white to play on. Bishop f5, bringing all his pieces closer to white's king. Bishop h6 check. King h7, and here Ding gives this variation that you cannot take on c6 because of bishop and g6 check, king takes g4, f5 check, king f4, bishop d6 check, king f3, and do you see the checkmate? Rook takes f2 is checkmate. A wonderful variation. That's after knight takes c6 in this position. Bai took another option. He took on b7 and Ding took on f2. The threat is now knight g3 checkmate. So bishop g5, gaining a flight square for the king on h4. This bishop is now not covering the h4 square, so that's a flight square. That's why bishop g5 was played. Rook h8, and Ding says, with every move I bring my pieces closer to his king, all the while threatening mate. Knight takes f7 was played here by Bai. Ding gives this variation. You cannot take on c6 because of king g8 check. The rook is now giving check. Bishop h6 and knight g3 is checkmate. So knight takes f7 was tried. At least you're now attacking the rook there. Bishop g6 check, and Ding shows this variation. King h4 would have led to a beautiful mate. This is really a beautiful one. King g8 check, knight takes the rook, but then bishop takes g5 check, king takes g4, and look at this checkmate move, knight e5. Is this a pretty picture? Yes, it is. 5 pieces around the white king, and the king is checkmated. So that was after king h4 in this position, but Bai decided to take on g4, and now knight e5 check. And white resigned here. He's going to be checkmated. If you take the knight, then bishop f5 check, king h5, king g8 check, bishop h6, and knight g3 is checkmate. And another way to get mated is to play the king to h4, then king g8 check, knight takes rook, but bishop takes g5 is checkmate. It's quite incredible, all these different checkmates, all in one game. It definitely is the game of the year. Ding said that after knight e5 check, when Bai resigned, he said, "To be honest, I did not mind that my opponent did not allow me to execute a mate on the board. If you play a game, you do not want to be mated. I think it was a very reasonable decision of him to resign when he did." And he said, "This game looks very beautiful, but I'm mostly proud of the moves 18 knight a4 and 20 rook d4. After this I knew I was winning, as long as I was careful. I'm happy that my plan was straightforward and I did not spoil it. I felt very excited after this game. During the next days, the game and the variations kept popping up in my head all the time. Even when I was lying in bed at night, positions would appear in my mind and new tries by white that I had to refute. Every time I would try to find a solution and prove that the sacrifice was sound." What a game. Ding Liren, let's see how he gets on in the Candidates tournament. He might be Magnus Carlsen's new challenger, who knows. And then of course there's the question about resigning. Why do you not play on? Why do you not allow your opponent in such a beautiful game to show the checkmate on the board? In the same issue of New in Chess, it's Grandmaster Nigel Short who says that if art is being created, if there's a beautiful game or a beautiful checkmate, then a player should be magnanimous enough to allow the player, the winning player, to show the checkmate combination, to show the checkmate on the board. Sometimes chess is art, and when a piece of art is being created, we should show it. Also, of course, for players who are not strong enough to calculate the mate variations, if they see it on the board, then they might become more interested in this beautiful game. I will create a little poll on this video, or maybe as a separate activity on YouTube, asking you the question: do you agree with Nigel Short? Should the games be played on till checkmate, even in Grandmaster games? And you can tell me yes or no, you can tell me what you think. And also you can do that in the comments, of course. Hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment, and if you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media. You also may want to check out my Chess to Progress channel. The link is in the description box. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.